Congratulations on having chosen to continue your diving adventure by taking the PSS Scuba Diver course. This course is the best way to approach diving. The course will enable you to qualify as a PSS scuba diver. You can dive all over the world with this qualification up to a depth of 12 meters, accompanied by a guide or an instructor.
Although good watermanship skills are useful when learning to dive, it is not necessary to be an expert swimmer. What is important is that you can stay afloat where you cannot touch the bottom. Before the end of the course, your instructor will ask you to perform 2 watermanship skills tests.
But let's conclude the theory part with some interesting new notions.
Buoyancy. Matter is characterized by its density. By comparing it with water, it may have a greater or lesser density. On the basis of this fact, we will have different conditions of buoyancy. Let's make a practical example by immersing a plastic bottle full of air in water. The bottle tends to rise to the surface. It is said to have positive buoyancy. If we fill the same bottle with sand and take it under the water, it will tend to sink. It is said to have negative buoyancy. The same bottle filled with water tends to stay at the depth it is immersed. It is said to have neutral buoyancy.
The condition of buoyancy depends on 2 factors, the immersed volume and the weight of the object. If the immersed volume increases, as it does when you wear a dive suit or inflate the buoyancy compensator, the buoyancy increases. If the immersed volume decreases, for example, when you deflate the BC or expel air from your lungs, the buoyancy decreases.
Thousands of minute gas bubbles, which are lighter than water, are trapped in the neoprene foam and therefore make you more buoyant. But these gas bubbles are compressible. As you go deeper and the pressure increases, the volume of these bubbles decreases and reduces the volume of water displaced by the wetsuit. Consequently, the buoyancy of the wetsuit will also become less. Buoyancy compensators enable you to adjust your buoyancy during the dive. The BC should be well inflated on the surface so that your head is held as high as possible out of the water. To go under the water, you have to deflate the BC and exhale as much air as possible from your lungs. The amount of weight worn must be sufficient to help you descend slowly under the water. The BC compensates for the variation in buoyancy caused by the change in pressure. In fact, as you begin descending, the volumes of the wetsuit and the air in the BC decrease, causing you to become negatively buoyant. To counteract this, just inflate the buoyancy compensator a little at a time. This phenomenon is reversed as you ascend, so in this case you have to deflate the BC gradually as you come up to the surface, so that the rate of ascent is always under control. Do not inflate the BC to ascend, because this will cause you to ascend too quickly, a potentially dangerous situation that is sometimes referred to as going Polaris. With practice and experience, you will be able to move freely under the water and enjoy the same sensations as flying through the air. Breathing during the dive. Let's now take a brief look at the various phases of a real dive. The first thing you have to do is assemble the various parts of the aqualung, the cylinder, the buoyancy compensator and the regulators. Remember to make sure that the hose is connected to the inflator-deflator device. Don the aqualung and make sure that everything is working. As soon as you are ready, enter the water in the safest and most suitable way. On the surface, with the BC well inflated and the regulator in your mouth, begin breathing more deeply than normal. After checking that you can equalize your ears, deflate the BC and exhale as much air as possible from your lungs so you will begin descending. As you descend, stay in a head-up position and equalize often. If you exhale through your nose, you will automatically equalize the mask. To slow down the descent, you must inflate the BC using short bursts. After each short burst of air, wait a moment to check your buoyancy, otherwise you risk inflating the BC too much. If you do have a problem equalizing, ascend a little and try equalizing again. If you manage to equalize, you can continue descending. If you can't equalize, you must abort the dive. If you have a problem equalizing just one ear, this might make you feel dizzy. This is not serious. Just hold on to the descent line or your dive buddy. Ascend a little and the dizziness will pass. Once you have reached the planned depth, you should fine-tune your buoyancy by inflating or deflating your BC slightly so that you can stay effortlessly at your planned depth without finning. You can make slight corrections to your buoyancy by inhaling or exhaling more deeply than normal and using the air in your lungs. To ascend, just give a slight kick upward with your fins. You will become positively buoyant and begin rising towards the surface. As the pressure decreases, the air in the BC will expand and you will begin ascending faster. To slow the ascent down, just deflate the BC a little at a time and try to maintain a controlled ascent rate. However, always remember to keep breathing slowly and deeply. Pressure imbalances on ascent.
In the previous module, we saw the problems caused by the compression of the body's gas cavities during the descent.
Let's now take a look at what happens if the external pressure decreases, as it does, for example, on ascent. The closed cavities, such as the lungs of the free diver, return to their original volume. Open air spaces can eliminate any eventual excess gas without any problems. But what happens to those air spaces enclosed by a membrane? If the excess gas is not eliminated, the membrane will curve outward, extraflexion, due to the force of the internal pressure. This situation can also cause damage to the membrane if it is stretched too far.
In the case of the middle ear, the opening of the Eustachian tube permits the excess air to be expelled automatically.
As you ascend, you might get the feeling that air under pressure is trapped inside an ear. This is rare, but if it does happen, just stop and descend a little and wait for the air under pressure to come out. If this also causes dizziness, the best thing to do is to hold on to the ascent line until the sensation passes. Why do scuba divers keep on emphasizing the importance on never holding your breath underwater? Think about the BC. To prevent the bladder tearing, the BC is fitted with one or more overexpansion relief valves that dump the excess air when the internal pressure becomes too great. Your lungs are similar to the bladder of the BC, but they are not fitted with an overexpansion relief valve. If you keep your mouth closed or hold your breath as you ascend, the pressure in your lungs will become too great and cause serious injury. Preventing these serious injuries is extremely easy. Never hold your breath on ascent. Keep your regulator in your mouth and exhale continuously if you must take it out of your mouth. Decompression sickness. Let's now look at the relationship between gases and liquids. When a gas is in contact with the surface of a liquid, some of the gas molecules pass through and diffuse into the liquid, becoming a solution, just like sugar dissolving in water. The quantity of molecules that pass from a gas into a liquid depends on various factors, such as time, temperature, pressure, and the solubility coefficient. Solubility is the maximum number of molecules of a given gas that can dissolve in a particular liquid. When this level has been reached, the number of gas molecules in the liquid cannot increase. It is said that the liquid has reached saturation. The solubility of gas is not constant. For example, it increases if the pressure increases or if the temperature decreases. In fact, by increasing the pressure, more gas molecules pass into the liquid until saturation is reached for this new condition of pressure. If, however, we decrease the pressure, the gas molecules in excess are forced to abandon the liquid. An everyday example of this is a bottle of sparkling mineral water in which a gas, carbon dioxide, is dissolved in the water. Because the bottle is closed under pressure, when we open it the pressure falls suddenly and the excess gas molecules come out of the water, collecting together to form bubbles. You will notice that if the top is opened slowly, less bubbles form.
Our bodies are made up of tissues that absorb and release gas during the phases of descent and ascent.
The tissues of a diver behave like a bottle of mineral water. If decompression occurs too rapidly, the molecules of inert gas are released quickly and they could collect together to form bubbles. If the bubbles stay microscopic in size, they do not cause us any problems, and they are defined as silent or asymptomatic bubbles. But if they increase in volume and collect together, these bubbles can become big enough to obstruct a blood vessel and block the blood flow to some parts of the body. This condition is commonly known as embolism or decompression sickness. There are various types of decompression sickness, or DCS, more or less serious, depending on the tissue or organ affected. There are various and numerous signs and symptoms of decompression sickness: fatigue, swelling, painful joints, itching, skin rashes, back pain, pins and needles, difficulty in urinating, paralysis, disturbances to the sight, hemiparesis, choking, breathlessness, etc. If decompression sickness is suspected, oxygen should be breathed on the surface for at least 1 to 2 hours. If oxygen treatment is not sufficient, the diver should be transported urgently to the nearest available hyperbaric chamber to be recompressed. Today, particularly thanks to the use of diving computers, the risk of suffering from decompression sickness is very low. Dive tables.
Research that began in the early 1900s has made it possible to establish a safety curve that links the maximum dive time to the maximum depth reached on a dive. By making dives within these limits, it is possible to ascend directly to the surface without having to make a compulsory stop at a given depth. We can check the parameters of the dive thanks to 2 instruments. The first is a depth gauge, and this measures the depth.
Just as important is knowing how long you have spent under the water. This can be done using a watch or a timer.
With the readings of these instruments and the dive tables, we can make sure that the dive is made within the limits of the safety curve, so that we are able to ascend to the surface whenever we want.
It is extremely important to respect the rates of ascent and descent indicated on the tables. When using the PSS dive tables, the rate of descent is 20 meters per minute, 65 feet per minute, and the rate of ascent is 10 meters per minute, 33 feet per minute. When we surface after a dive, we need time to eliminate the excess inert gases still dissolved in our bodies. According to the PSS tables, this requires 12 hours. If we want to dive again before 12 hours has passed since our last dive, we make what is referred to as a repetitive dive. As we already have a level of excess inert gas in our body, the maximum time for the repetitive dive is reduced, depending on how long we spend out of the water, a period of time known as the surface interval. Dive computers give us many advantages in respect to the tables. During the dive, the display will indicate the actual depth you are at, the elapsed time, the maximum depth reached during the dive, and the time remaining of the maximum dive time, which should never reach 0. If you ascend a few meters, you will see that this time increases because you are making a multi-level dive. Computers have numerous audible alarms that call your attention to important information, such as, for example, a fast ascent rate. On all dives, it is strongly recommended that you stop on ascent at a depth of 5 meters, 15 feet, for 3 minutes, to make what is known as a safety stop. Problem solving. Diving is one of the most exciting activities that we can do on our planet, but to be able to enjoy it to the full, you must be in good health, just as you must be when you do any outdoor sports. For example, if you have a bad cold or sinusitis, you shouldn't dive because you are likely to have problems equalizing.
If you are taking medication with contraindications for sports activities or driving, you must not dive. Always speak to your instructor about it.
Even if you wear a wetsuit, you still lose heat in the water. One of the first symptoms of feeling cold is shivering. This should never be ignored because you lose heat much more quickly in water. Shivering is an evident sign that you must get out of the water immediately, get warm, dry off, change into dry clothes, and drink warm fluids without alcohol or caffeine. The opposite problem could also occur. The wetsuit also maintains its insulating property in air. Staying in the sun wearing a wetsuit can easily cause your body to overheat, and this can lead to heat exhaustion or even sunstroke. To cool off, jump in the water or wet the suit. To prevent thermal imbalances, don't ignore your body's warning signals. Despite good planning, problems may arise during a dive that must be dealt with in the right way. With experience, you will learn to recognize if something is going wrong before the problem actually occurs. At the moment, it is enough to know the most efficient way to deal with a problem. The first thing to do is to stop, breathe deeply, and consider how to solve the problem. Only after considering how to solve the problem should you act. Any problem, even the most banal, can degenerate into an emergency if it is not dealt with in the correct manner. Therefore, always stay calm. Remember that a diver's worst enemy is panic.
It should therefore be obvious that the taking of psychotropes, anti-stress medication, or drugs is a contraindication to diving. Always consult your instructor.
If you do happen to become separated from your buddy, the usual procedure is to search for 1 minute under the water, and if you cannot see him, you must ascend. This procedure should always be followed, unless the person responsible for the dive gave other instructions. The underwater environment. On this course you are learning the things you need to know so that you can explore the fantastic world hidden beneath the surface of the water. Diving can take place in diverse conditions and in various locations, each one different from another. Every dive you make will differ from the previous ones because of the location, the marine life you observe, or the conditions at the time. These varieties of environments have certain common factors that divers must examine before entering the water. One of these factors, which you already know about, is the water temperature. This can vary from over 30 degrees centigrade, 85 degrees Fahrenheit in warm tropical waters, to minus 2 degrees centigrade, 28 degrees Fahrenheit in the cold polar seas. Another important factor that divers must take into consideration is the visibility. This can vary from over 50 meters, 165 feet, to just a few centimeters, inches.
Before the dives, the instructor or guide will tell you about the type of environment you will be diving in. This is called the briefing, and you should always listen to it very carefully.
Future prospects.
You are almost ready, together with your guide, to fly into this exciting submerged kingdom. The doors to this marvelous underwater world have been opened to you, and the adventure of a lifetime has begun. In order to continue diving safely, it is important that you always dive within your limits. Don't accept dares. Don't stop diving. Continuous practice will enable you to gain experience and feel more confident in what you are doing. With time, you will want to improve your skills and extend your personal limits. You will also probably want to become an independent diver. Being an independent diver means you will be able to dive with other dive buddies without a guide and to even greater depths. Reaching this objective is simple. Just attend the PSS Open Water Diver course. It is a more demanding experience, but one that is both interesting and formative. Those who already hold the PSS Scuba Diver qualification can also take advantage of a reduction in the number of sessions in confined water and the number of dives in open water. Don't miss this opportunity.
We are waiting for you.